So people say, oh, these clots aren't real, that's all made up, whatever. People are confabulating. These are from living patients. So these patients, fortunately, are still with us. So I have some surgical colleagues around the country that have seen an increase in their patients, thankfully done the scans, found them, and extracted them. So these thick fibrous clots are in vivo as well. These are in living patients. The interesting tube of blood on the right, this was a patient from my colleague, Dr. Burkhardt in Germany, and she had 3 shots. Whenever it would get cold, her fingers would start to hurt, kind of a Raynaud's phenomenon. They took a tube of blood, set it on the counter, and little fibrils started to form. They spun it down, and the material within this spun down big nugget there is the same as what we're seeing in the clots. So we'll go slide forward. And this is what it looks like. It looks like just this pink amorphous material. Well, that's fibrin, it's reticulin, it's a bunch of amino acids, but more importantly, there's a material that the body doesn't break down very easily called amyloid. I don't want to scare everybody and say, gosh, everybody that has, the shot is going to have this. No, the good news is most people are fine. However, from a scientific point of view, you can't find what you don't look for. So early on, the agencies and Fauci encourage people not to do autopsies. So you're not going to find if you're not looking. The morticians that started seeing these, they were getting, when a body comes in and they have to preserve it, they cannulate large vessels, they put their needles in large vessels, they started getting back pressure that they hadn't experienced before. And there are 1 or 2 that have spoken out, but I know of about another 50 that are seeing the same, but again, want to keep their jobs. So they don't say anything. But when we look at these clots under the microscope, this is what we see. This is just an example of the postmortem clots. And yes, they're long and they're very fibrous. And that fibrous aspect of them, there's no, nanochips and wires and all this crazy stuff you hear on the internet. I think that's just all tinfoil scaremongering. But what there is unusual amounts of collected proteins. There are unusual combinations of proteins that make these very difficult for the body to dissolve. There's one thing that I've been a big advocate for, and that's derived from fermented soy, nattokinase, which is an enzyme that breaks down fibrin. And if you look at, again, parts of the world like northern Japan, they don't die from heart disease and strokes. And they eat a lot of this fermented soy in their diet. Right. And I'm not your doctor. I'm just saying an interesting observation is to look at this. It's known as a fibrinolytic enzyme that's naturally available both in food and as a supplement. And I've had colleagues who've ended up with clots after long travels and put on Eliquis and other drugs. And I said, have you tried nattokinase? And a day or 2 later, gosh, their clot is dissolved. So there are enzymatic mechanisms to start breaking these clots down before all these other amyloid proteins can start to piggyback on and compound and get bigger and bigger and bigger.